Okay, so picture this. You're standing at a harbor. You see one of those giant container ships, and you notice the bottom is bright red. It's on pretty much every big ship, right? But have you ever stopped and wondered why? Well, let's get into it, because the answer is this amazing story that mixes together ancient sailors, some really clever chemistry, and a tradition that just stuck.
And look, we're not just talking about a popular color choice here. This is like a universal standard. You'll see it on massive cargo ships. You'll see it on fancy cruise liners. They all have it. So what is the deal with that red paint?
All right, so before we get to the real reason, let's just bust a few myths right off the bat. No, it's not to scare off sharks. It's not some kind of marine camouflage. And it's not just because someone thought it looked nice. The actual reason is way more practical. And it all starts with this ancient battle against a kind of invisible enemy.
To really get this, we've got to go way back, a few centuries back. And our story doesn't start with pain at all. It starts with this relentless fight against an enemy that lurked just under the surface of the water. An enemy with a name, biofouling.
So what is biofouling? Basically, it's just all the gunk that grows on stuff you leave in the ocean. Think barnacles, algae, seaweed. You know, all those little critters that see a ship's hull and think, hey, free real estate. And you gotta understand, for sailors back in the age of wooden ships, this was an absolute nightmare. I mean, a big, slow wooden hull was basically a giant floating buffet. And the worst guest at this party? A nasty little creature called the shipworm. And these things could literally eat a ship from the inside out. No joke. And the effects were just devastating. We're not talking about a small problem here. A ship covered in all this gunk could lose up to half its top speed, 50%. Think about that. Back then, speed was everything. It was the difference between winning a battle or making money on a trade route. Losing that speed was a total disaster. So, obviously, sailors were desperate for a solution. And then, in the late 1700s, they had a breakthrough. A really brilliant one. This was the beginning of a whole new era of protecting ships. The age of copper. This was a huge leap forward, really. You had these wooden ships getting eaten alive, and suddenly we have this incredible solution using metal. It was a total game changer. And the idea itself was actually pretty simple, but so effective. Shipbuilders literally started nailing thin sheets of pure copper all over the bottom of the wooden hulls. I mean, can you imagine? It must have been so much work and super expensive, but man, it worked like a charm. So why copper? What was the magic here? Well, it turns out copper is what's called a natural biocide, which is just a fancy way of saying that when it hits salt water, it creates this surface that's basically toxic to all that marine gunk. Barnacles can't latch on, and those nasty shipworms, no way they could chew through it. All of a sudden, ships were fast, they were light, and they were staying in one piece. So this copper sheathing thing was the perfect solution. For a while, it was perfect right up until we stopped making ships out of wood. See, along came the Industrial Revolution, and with it, ships made of iron and steel. And that created a brand new, totally unexpected problem. And the problem was all about chemistry. You see, you just couldn't nail copper sheets onto an iron hull. Turns out, when you put two different metals like iron and copper together in salt water, the water basically turns them into a giant battery. It creates this chemical reaction, it's called galvanic corrosion, that just eats away at the iron. It would rust and destroy the hull super fast. Okay, so shipbuilders had to go back to the drawing board. They couldn't use sheets of copper anymore, but they still needed that awesome anti-gunk power that copper had. So what do? Well, someone had a brilliant idea. What if we put the copper inside the paint? And just like that, anti-fouling paint was invented. And right here, this is the aha moment. This is the key to the whole puzzle. To make this new paint work, chemists needed a compound with copper in it to be the active ingredient, the part that keeps the critters away. And the natural color of that essential ingredient just so happened to be, you guessed it, red. The compound they used was called copper oxide, and its natural color is this deep, rusty red. So that iconic red color you see on the bottom of ships, it wasn't a design choice, it wasn't a fashion statement, it was just the color of the science they needed to protect the ship. Okay, so that explains the history, but let's jump to today. Our chemical technology is incredible now, right? We can make these anti-fouling paints in literally any color we want. Blue, green, yellow, whatever. So why are ships still red? And that really is the final piece of the puzzle, isn't it? We could have ships with crazy colors, bright blue, neon green bottoms. So why does this color from the 1800s still dominate every harbor in the world?
Well, it really boils down to two things. First, you've got just plain old tradition. Sailors tend to be a pretty traditional bunch, very respectful of history. But there's also a second, super practical reason why red is still the color of choice.
And that reason is all about safety. Most ships have a black upper hull, right? Well, that sharp contrast between the black top and the red bottom makes it really easy to see something called the Plimsoll line. Those are the little marks on the side of a ship that show how heavily it's loaded. For a safety inspector at a port, that bright red waterline makes it super obvious if a ship is sitting too low in the water and is dangerously overloaded. It's a simple, effective visual check.
So the next time you see that bold red line on a ship cutting through the waves, you'll know the whole story. It's so much more than just paint. It's a piece of history. A color that was born out of a chemical necessity, that's carried on because of tradition, and that still plays a role in keeping sailors safe today. It's really the perfect symbol of our long, clever, and ongoing relationship with the sea.